Today, we begin with a national crisis that law enforcement officials, civil rights advocates, and elected leaders had feared, condemned, and desperately tried to prevent. A fatal shooting that unfolded not over hours of deliberation, but in seconds. Seconds that ended the life of Alex Pretti, a 37-year-old ICU nurse. Seconds that ignited a constitutional standoff between federal and state governments. Seconds that fractured the Republican Party at a moment when unity seemed guaranteed. What federal immigration agents did on January 24th crossed a line that constitutional scholars had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, the state of Minnesota did not hesitate. They responded with defiance, with legal authority, and with an unwavering demand for accountability. For weeks now, there had been warnings, not from official White House statements, not from formal ICE briefings, just warnings that the Trump administration was preparing something unprecedented in immigration enforcement. Trump's team has been aggressive, yes, but they have been methodical in their aggression. Their moves have followed a certain pattern, a rhythm, almost a playbook. But what set off alarm bells in Minneapolis and state capitals across the country this month was that the pattern went silent. Civil rights attorneys who monitor federal enforcement actions know the indicators, the advance notices to local law enforcement, the coordination with state officials, the transparency around operational scope, the adherence to established use of force protocols. All of that went quiet. And whenever federal agencies conducting immigration operations go quiet, it means something is about to get loud. The Trump administration had telegraphed its intentions clearly: mass deportations, expanded ICE authority, reduced oversight. But the execution in Minneapolis revealed something darker, a willingness to bypass constitutional safeguards, to operate without local coordination, and to use lethal force under circumstances that veteran law enforcement officials are calling deeply suspicious. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz had been monitoring federal operations in his state closely. His office had requested briefings. They'd been denied. They'd requested coordination protocols. Those requests went unanswered. The silence wasn't bureaucratic delay. It was operational concealment. Early morning on January 24th, federal immigration agents deployed what witnesses described as a military-style operation, including tactical gear and weapons protocols that had not been standard in civilian immigration enforcement in over a decade. These are the kinds of assets and tactics that ICE only deploys when they are signaling something very specific: high-value cartel targets, organized smuggling operations, or situations involving imminent violent threats. Constitutional observers didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that federal agents were changing their operational posture. And when federal law enforcement shifts operational posture without explanation, even by small measures, civil libertarians pay attention. According to multiple eyewitness accounts and video footage now circulating online, Alex Pretti was standing on a Minneapolis street when federal agents approached. He was not the subject of any warrant. He had no criminal record. He was, by every account, an ICU nurse finishing a shift, holding a phone in his hand. Within seconds, federal agents fired. The Trump administration's initial narrative was swift and definitive. Pretti was armed. He was a threat. He was, according to some officials, a would-be assassin who had brandished a weapon at federal officers. But the videos told a different story. Frame by frame, witness by witness, a counter-narrative emerged, one showing an unarmed man holding only a cell phone shot by federal agents who may have mistaken his phone for a weapon, or worse, who may have fired without proper cause at all. This wasn't a split-second decision made in the fog of war. This was a federal operation on American soil in an American city involving an American citizen captured on multiple cameras contradicting the official government account within hours. The statement issued by Minnesota's governor tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was a direct challenge to federal authority. State officials after emergency meeting described the federal agent's actions as unconstitutional, unlawful, and perhaps most importantly, criminal, a term rarely used by elected officials to describe federal law enforcement. But condemnation only works if the condemned hesitate. The Trump administration did not. In fact, their response today was among the most aggressive we've seen in modern federal-state conflicts. Here's what we know. Within hours of Pretti's death, President Trump publicly blamed Democratic state and local leaders for inciting insurrection against federal immigration enforcement. These weren't the standard political attacks. These were accusations of sedition, language that federal authorities only deploy when they are preparing to escalate beyond rhetoric and into action. Trump administration officials doubled down. They didn't walk back the terrorist label. They didn't acknowledge the contradicting video evidence. They didn't pause operations pending investigation. Instead, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt defended the agents, calling their actions necessary and justified, while providing no evidence to support the claim that Pretti was armed. Vice President J.D. Vance went further, stating that anyone interfering with federal immigration enforcement would face the full weight of federal law. This wasn't damage control. This was defiance. Today, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension confirmed that state investigators have launched a criminal investigation into the shooting, treating federal agents as subjects rather than witnesses. State prosecutors moved before the Department of Justice could claim jurisdiction. They secured witness testimony. They obtained video evidence. They identified federal agents who were likely involved in the decision to use lethal force. In other words, Minnesota targeted the legal framework that would have shielded federal agents from state prosecution, the jurisdictional battle that would have made prosecution impossible. This is what made the governor's response so urgent. The Trump administration's narrative wasn't just false, it was coordinated. It represented the kind of official misinformation that could justify further violence if left unchallenged, and Minnesota, understanding that fully, responded with legal force, not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't issue vague calls for transparency. They didn't request federal coordination. They hit the administration with state-level criminal investigations. They hit them with public evidence contradicting the official narrative. Governor Walz held a press conference within 12 hours, standing beside the state attorney general, the Minneapolis police chief, and members of Pretti's family. He didn't mince words. Alex Pretti was murdered, not killed in the line of duty, not caught in crossfire, murdered by federal agents who had no legal authority to be conducting operations without state coordination, who fired on an unarmed man, and who are now being protected by an administration willing to lie to the American people. Those are not words a governor uses lightly. Those are words that signal a constitutional crisis. And here's where the story becomes even more explosive. Intelligence sources now believe that the Trump administration's immigration escalation was designed to test the resolve of Democratic governors after Biden's departure from office. Trump wanted to see whether blue states would comply with federal overreach, but instead the opposite happened. Minnesota did not comply. They launched a criminal investigation so aggressive, so legally sound, that even Trump's Justice Department noticed. You don't get the Trump administration's attention easily, but today Minnesota did. Constitutional law experts speaking with media under anonymity described Trump's strategy as stress testing federalism, a way to identify which states would resist and which would fold. But Minnesota proved today that they remain both legally prepared and politically unafraid. Their response was not only swift, it was surgical, so precisely calibrated that it avoided federal supremacy arguments while asserting state criminal jurisdiction. That legal precision matters because it shows Minnesota isn't acting emotionally. It shows that Minnesota isn't playing defense. They are setting legal precedent, and legal precedent is the one thing that could constrain Trump's enforcement ambitions for the remainder of his term. Federal immigration authority is broad, but it is not unlimited. States retain criminal jurisdiction over federal agents who commit crimes. The Supremacy Clause doesn't grant immunity for murder, and tonight Minnesota is making that argument in court filings, in press conferences, and in the court of public opinion. As reports continued coming in throughout the day, we learned more about the scale of Minnesota's response.